Back in 2008, the Center for Public Integrity and its affiliated group, the Fund for Independence in Journalism, they did a little study, and they wanted to see how many lies members of the Bush administration told publicly before the Iraq War, in the run-up to the Iraq War, okay? Well, here's what that study found by the Center for Public Integrity. They found that leading Bush administration officials had publicly lied at least 935 times.
No!
The major lie was about Saddam Hussein's regime possessing weapons of mass destruction, but the second most common lie was that there was a link between Saddam and al-Qaeda, which made the possibility of an Iraqi nuclear weapon falling into the hands of terrorists who perpetrated 9/11 particularly frightening. So, okay.
Jimmy,
go ahead.
Jimmy, because they're Republicans, they insist that they were white lies.
Okay, so the Bush administration's been documented to have publicly lied 935 times to get us into the illegal war in Iraq. And most of the lies were about Iraq working with al-Qaeda and WMDs. But then a few people stood up to those lies, right? And like there were protesters. I was one of them. I was protesting against the Iraq War. I knew it was BS. I'm sure, Jim, you knew it was BS. You were against the Iraq War, correct?
Yeah, but I did not say a word. I refuse to stick my neck out. You know, I need work.
I hear you.
I need writing work. Anybody out there hiring a writer, I'm there for you. Okay. I will not make waves. All right, go ahead.
Steph was against the war. Frank, were you against the war?
I very vocally opposed the war to my cat.
Yes.
And I was against it.
So,
very vociferously.
So the people who stood up against the war, which there were lots and lots of people, right? But the story is, the narrative now is that everybody was hoodwinked. We all thought Saddam had what? That's the story, but it's not true. That's not true because people were speaking up loud. Phil Donahue got fired off MSNBC for speaking out against the Iraq War before it happened. Okay,
the journalism that had a difference, that told the real story, was not. You really had to dig deep to find it. You didn't see it. You didn't, like the guys for the McClatchy papers who wrote stuff that turned out to be true. Those guys were not on any of the cable. Pontificating or anything.
No, they were not on the front page of the New York Times.
No.
Like Judith Miller, okay?
Well, and even at the time, it was just so bizarre because it had no precipitation. So you're watching it and you're like, wait a second, we're talking about going to a war with a country that didn't do anything to us. Like there was no precipitating event at all. And the logic behind it, a lot of the run-up to the war was about getting weapons inspectors in there. They would get there, and then they would say, okay, Iraq, it's up to you to prove to us that you don't have weapons, which didn't make sense at all. And that was the big run-up. And I was just sitting there going, this isn't happening. This doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, there were people speaking.
And also,
go ahead, Frank.
I'd also point out that in terms of the atmosphere of the media at the time, as an example, Al Gore made a speech saying that we shouldn't invade Iraq, and he talked about it on one of the shows. And Howard Feynman said, Al Gore is an embarrassment, and he should just go away.
Yes. Yes.
Really?
So that was the overall general.
That was, and I'll give you some more quotes. I'll give you
not just on Fox News, like everywhere, every mainstream media outlet, including the Oprah Winfrey Show. If you watch Bill Moyer's documentary about what we're talking about right now, which I highly recommend, he has a clip of Oprah berating an audience member for questioning the Iraq War experts that she had on her show, and she berated the person in the audience who questioned what they were saying.
Well, even on, you talk about not only on Fox, but of course, MSNBC famously fired Phil Donahue, and kept Chris Matthews, who was cheerleading for the war, even though he claims he wasn't.
He's just Chris Matthews just now on his show. I only saw part of it, but he was, as he does often, he was reading his column that he wrote before the war, where he was against it, but he completely leaves out the history of what a cheerleader for the war.
Yes, he also recently, just a couple of days ago, had on the wife of a deceased correspondent reporter who came out against the war.
Yes.
And Matthews is, just asking, well, how could anybody, back this war? I mean, the guy had so much courage and everything.
Yes.
Everything coming out against the war. We were just all hoodwinked.
Part of that critique that woman was making was that she felt her husband. What's that guy's I
forget.
Hastings?
Yes, Michael Hastings. So it was his wife. They just released a book posthumously that he wrote, and what she was saying to Chris Matthews was that my husband felt that the media was too cozy with the people they were covering.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem. And Chris acted like, yeah, that is a big problem. Yeah, I'm definitely on with that. The guy who claimed that he was too towel snappy with George W. Bush.
Right.
Chris Matthews, self-admitted.
Chris Matthews was so cozy with the Bush administration, he got gonorrhea.
So here's so on MSNBC after the first on CNBC, on Fox Business, after the first statue of Saddam Hussein fell in Baghdad,
sure,
Neil Cavuto delivered a message to those, quote, people who opposed the liberation of Iraq. He said, quote, "You were sickening then, and you are sickening now."
Wow.
People who opposed the Iraq war, that's Neil Cavuto, said you were sickening for opposing a war. Michael Savage on MSNBC. Remember when he was on MSNBC? Mm-hmm. Michael Savage, he said he was on with Joe Scarborough on MSNBC. Him and Joe Scarborough and Michael Savage said of the protesters, they are absolutely committing sedition or treason. That's what he said of people protesting the war. Joe Scarborough snapped right back at Michael Savage and said, these leftist stooges for anti-American causes are always given a free pass. Isn't it time to make them stand up and be counted for their views? So when people, I let you know those things, and I'm glad Frank shared those other ones about Oprah.
By the way, thank God Joe Scarborough got thrown off the air and isn't on anymore.
Yeah, thank God for that, for being so. So here's Joe Scarborough now, right? So that was Joe Scarborough then, shaming people who were right about Iraq, exercising their First Amendment rights and speaking out against a warmongering government.
And by the way, we're proven right within a matter of weeks.
Within a matter of weeks, we're proven correct, right?
And wasn't it one of the largest protests against war?
Yes, it was.
That went
almost uncovered.
Right.
I was a part of that protest, I just might add, in New York.
Yes, you were, Frank? Fantastic. So here's Joe Scarborough now, Frank.
11 years later.
11 years later. When Iraq is falling apart into three sectarian parts of a country like everybody predicted, here's what he has to say now.
So, Mika, I don't... Both sides are going to be able to blame the other. We've got a package coming up talking about all the mistakes that have been made on both sides.
Actually.
But...
Yeah, but let's be honest. There was just one side. It was just the warmongering side. I love how, everybody, let's not try to assess blame. That's the biggest... Let's not try to assess why. Yeah.
To be honest, Jimmy, our side did make a big mistake about what a mitigating horrific disaster it would be. Some thought it would be really, 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 really bad. Some thought it would be just really, really bad.
Yeah, so they were also conflicted,
yes.
Right? The people there was a lot of infighting on the people who were against the war.
Right.
Yeah, some people said it would be horrible. Some people said it would just be rotten. Yeah, so... Well, here is what Bill Kristol has to say about people trying to assign blame.
Bill Kristol, always wrong.
The President of the United States wants to go on TV and say, you know what, I was right that we should never have gotten involved in the first place. Bill Kristol and all those guys were wrong. I'm fine with that. This is not the time for recriminations. This is a serious national security crisis.
No, now is not the time for recriminations.
No, the time was 2008 when you guys should have all been hauled in front of the Congress and brought up on war charges.
Yes. Yeah, it's not a good time now. In fact, Robert, it hasn't been a good time for recriminations for, I would say, the last 11 years.
Yeah, yeah.
But we need to wait a little more time, at least until after the next war, to figure out who were the a-holes who got us into the first war, right? So I'm guessing the very...
By the way,
go ahead, Frank.
Bill Kristol is on TV all the time now and has always been. But he is not... He's no longer a Fox News commentator. He is on ABC.
Yes. No, he's everywhere. He's on more...
on ABC every Sunday. He's, so it's...
Yeah, he's not afraid of recriminations. He's not even afraid of, career consequences.
He gets promoted all the time.
He has no skin in the game, ultimately.
Yeah.
He just gets to pop off.
Another thing is several years ago, after he was wrong about everything, he was given a column in the New York Times.
Yes. Again, this is a study in failing upward, right? Wolfowitz, he architects the Iraq invasion. He is comically wrong about it. He is then punished by being made president of the World Bank.
Next thing you're going to tell me, Jimmy, that Judith Miller is a credible voice now in the news.
Judith Miller is proving that being disgraced as a journalist only leads to huge TV contracts on Fox News, which is exactly what happened to her. And everyone talks to her like she's not completely a joke. Anyone they ask her opinion on things.